Hello, and welcome to the Rattlebox Games Podcast, a bi-weekly romp through the fertile fields of the world of tabletop games with your friends at Rattlebox Games. I'm Rob, and I'm here today with
Brendan.
On today's show, we're going to discuss the games that we've been playing since last we spoke.
Then we're going to talk about expansions a little bit. Why are they? What are they? Why would you want to buy one?
And then, as per usual, we'll give you some recommendations from outside of the world of tabletop games.
Stick with us.
If you want to get in touch with us, you can contact us on Twitter. We are at Rattlebox Games.
You can send us an email using the email address podcast@rattleboxgames.com.
Hey, Brendan.
Hey, Rob.
Should we take a moment to talk about the podcasts?
I think we should, and the best place to do that is here on the podcast.
Very meta of us.
Indeed.
Why are there 3 shows in this feed?
In part, it's because we have so much to give.
Oh, just generosity of spirit.
Indeed. I think it goes to the old adage that one of the things that keeps you from getting stuff done is starting. We started releasing the episodes of the podcasts because we wanted to get moving on them. Then we started to figure out what's the optimal way to release them so that our listeners can get the most out of them they want.
Yes, so we struck while the iron was hot. Now we're at the point where we're going to start shaping the iron with the blows that we are dealing to the hot iron. So what's our plan now?
As all of our listeners know, up till now we've had 3 different shows that are all coming out on this podcast stream.
So there's this show.
There's Install from Heap, which is my Android Netrunner mini podcast.
And then there's been 2 episodes of the Matter of Drag D&D podcast.
I think you're wrong there, Rob. There's 2 excellent episodes.
2 edge-of-the-seat, thrilling episodes of Daring Do and Adventure, yes.
For sure. There's a variety of reasons that we might want to have those be separate for people who are Netrunner enthusiasts only and who don't play D&D or aren't interested in board games. You should be. Join us for these other podcasts. But there might be people who just want to listen to the Netrunner podcast or just the D&D podcast or just this one.
But we're going to maintain this feed where everything's on it as well.
Right.
So we're going to have, I guess in the end, we'll have 4 feeds here. We'll have 1 individual feed for each show, and then we'll have the joint feed where everything comes out. So if you like everything we're doing, there's a place for you to easily get it. And at that rate, you'll be probably getting 2 episodes a week of something.
3 episodes every 2 weeks.
Yeah, we'll see. That might change.
Ooh. Spoiler for next year. If you are interested in subscribing to the podcast feeds separately, I would say go to our website, rattleboxgames.com/podcast, and we will have a note there about how to do that, or you can look for them in your favorite podcast distribution channel.
Yes, and actually I think that we're going to be on YouTube. Just the audio files hosted on YouTube as well. So our means of distribution are expanding.
That's right. So there's more places where you can listen. So if you want to listen to more than once, you have that option.
Excellent. All right. So we've all got that to look forward to. We can all take a visit over to rattleboxgames.com/podcast and see what there is to see, or just keep listening here, which is my recommendation.
Yeah.
Take it all in.
Right.
Because that you don't play Dungeons and Dragons or that you don't play Netrunner doesn't mean that you can't. So keep listening.
For sure. Maybe you'll be excited by what you hear, and then you'll start playing it, and that would be great.
Hear, hear. With all of this, it sounds like great reasons to reach out and talk to us. That being said, as is always the first question I have for you, Brendan, is what have you been playing since last we spoke? Which really isn't the first question. We've already asked other questions.
We have, and we've answered them.
Shh, don't tell anyone.
Only our listeners know. We are recording in the week after Thanksgiving right now, so I just got back from a long trip to Minnesota where I enjoyed plenty of game time with family and friends.
Did it snow?
You know, it sleeted a little bit on our way there.
Okay.
When we got there was plenty of snow on the ground, but what with the changing weather patterns that aren't really happening, the snow melted while we were there. And so for the first time in a while, it was brown in Minnesota at Thanksgiving. Usually you can count on it being snowy in a way that it's not in Chicago.
Yeah.
So I had a chance to play a couple sort of hobby games there. One of them is a game I really enjoy called Retreat to Darkmoor. That's from Action Phase Games by designer Isaac Shalev and another guy whose name I forget at this time. You know, I just remembered we didn't roll to see how long we were going to talk. I was like, I'm feeling a lot of freedom to give as much detail as I want. That's ridiculous. That's because I shouldn't have this much freedom. We better roll to see how much time we have.
What are you going to roll?
I think a D6 is our usual.
Sounds good.
All right, here we go. It's a 5. We
Oh.
got 5 minutes. Plenty of time.
Huge fields of time through which to run.
I'll start the conversation, perhaps, with a more gamerly game that I got to play over Thanksgiving, which is Retreat to Darkmoor. It's from designers Matt Loomis and Isaac Shalev. The premise of this game, it's very cute and silly. We are evil overlords who have sent a horde of monsters to attack a city, and we underestimated how strong the city was.
Wait, is this in the game?
In the game.
Oh, because, of course,
Right.
that's true in real life, too.
Sure. That's our other podcast, How to Destroy Things. In the game, our minions are running away from the city being pursued by heroes who are trying to kill them.
Okay.
And we line our minions up in front of various places where they can hide, like in a cave or a cemetery. And once a certain amount of minions have been lined up in front of a location, then the hero attacks that group and kills the one in the back, and then the rest of them are able to get refuge inside. So what you're trying to do is get your monsters inside each location, because you score points for both the monsters you've protected, and if you have the most at any location, you're going to score that location at the end. A lot of the monsters, when you put them down, they allow you to move other people's monsters. Some of the heroes attack the monster in the front or the biggest monster or whatever. So there's a variety of different ways. The art is by Jackie Davis, who did Euphoria and Epic Resort. Her art tends to have a pretty funny, cute look to it, and I really like it. So, yeah, Retreat to Darkmoor. It's great.
Excellent.
Why don't you do one?
Okay. Well, with the busy holiday having just passed, I haven't had a lot of time to play games, sadly.
Oh.
I know. So I'd say about the only game I've been playing is this, it's a new startup role-playing game. It's called Dungeons and Dragons.
Ooh, what's that
It's
about?
by Designer Gary Gygax.
He sounds great. I'd love to meet him.
We'll talk about that off air.
Oh, no.
Yes, so I've been playing that with our friends over at the Matter of Drag. It's actually been taking a lot of my time planning it, playing it, and then in this case, I now have to edit the audio from play sessions, which is not something that you usually have to do in a game of Dungeons and Dragons.
Being the DM is always extra work because you have to do all the planning.
Yeah.
But then now you're also the PM.
Yes. The other thing I'd like to say about Dungeons and Dragons is I played the first edition, and it's been interesting to really get to know the 5th edition. I feel like I had some familiarity with the 3.5 and 4, and I really feel like there's a conscious effort to return to 1 in this.
Oh, okay, getting back to the roots of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's great.
We've been enjoying it.
Nice. The one other thing I'd like to mention, because we're recording the week after Thanksgiving, and I got a chance to travel to Minnesota where it was very snowy. But over the course of the weekend, it got less snowy because of the weather. And while I was there, I had a number of chances to play games with family members who aren't hobby game players, which is always a special kind of challenge because as a gamer, I don't want to play Monopoly or Clue. Clue's fine, but it's pretty dull.
There were a couple friends on Facebook who, over the holiday, put pictures of themselves playing those games. Monopoly. I almost said something, but didn't.
I bring along games that are fun for me, but also accessible to others. The 3 that we brought that were well received. We brought Ticket to Ride, which is, I would say, a gateway game for people who haven't played hobby games. It's easy enough to understand. That was good fun. We actually played 3 games of Ticket to Ride over the weekend.
Which version of Ticket to Ride?
We just bring generic vanilla US Ticket to Ride. We have Ticket to Ride Europe, but it doesn't get as much play.
I'm going to steal a couple of your seconds here and say I think that's a mistake. I actually think that for the noobs, for the non-hobby gamers, I think Ticket to Ride Europe is actually a better game because there's the sharing of lines, which makes it less cutthroat.
I get that for sure. We also had very, very fun games of Telestrations, which is basically like the game of telephone drawn, and a couple successful rounds of 2 Rooms and a Boom, which is a good social deduction game. Oh, there's the timer.
All right, I guess we have to stop talking about that.
I stopped.
The only thing that's left to do then is to rate our games we've been playing. We usually use a D20 for that. My D20 rating of Dungeons and Dragons. Oh boy, I hadn't thought about that. You know what? It's been a really satisfying creative endeavor. So I'm going to give it, so far, a 17.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, Ticket to Ride is a family favorite of ours, but I will say that it doesn't have I don't have the thrill of playing an exciting game that I get when I play other games. So I'll give it a 13.
Okay.
Telestrations is a really more of a fun activity than a game, so I don't really want to rate it. 2 Rooms and a Boom. These rounds of it was probably 12 or 13. I think it's a game with a lot of potential, but you really need a good big group to play, and we were playing with about almost the minimum number of players, so it wasn't quite as fun.
All right, super. That then brings us to our topic for the week, and that would be expansions.
Expansions.
I know last episode when we were introducing this idea as being the subject for this week, I asked you to expand upon that. I know it's expound.
Sure.
But it's more fun.
Well, yeah.
Anyway, what are your favorite expansions?
Well,
No, I'm sorry. That's actually not how we're going to do it. So we sort of chose this topic a little bit off the cuff last episode.
Again, revealing the magic of the podcast, Rob.
I mean, at random, we scried. We read the chickens' entrails. Gosh, I still haven't gotten that spot out of the floor. As we were preparing for this episode, it was interesting to really stop and think about expansions. And one of the things that I started to do was try and categorize them in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at our list here. We've got a fair number of categories. Do you
Wow,
want us to
more
talk
than I
about?
would have expected, yeah.
As I would think of one, it would bring up another.
And I bet keen-eared listeners will be able to offer us more categories that we didn't cover here today.
Yes, I at Rattlebox Games think that they should at Rattlebox Games get in touch with us with those ideas. Let's go through our list. Do we want to talk about them as we go? Or
Yeah.
All right. Well, then the first one that I came up with was patching the game.
What do you mean by that?
A game that came out broken had an expansion, and I think that the hallmark of this is that it's included in the second edition.
Okay. Now, is it something that they release the first version of the game, then they release an expansion, and then when they do the second edition, that expansion is now included?
Exactly.
That's what you mean. Okay.
Yeah. I think Game of Thrones, which is actually an example of that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I never got a chance to play the first edition, so I don't know.
The Clash of Kings was an expansion in the first edition.
Oh, okay.
And is included in the second edition.
So it's sort of like they figured out, and it isn't just broken, but they maybe figured out the expansion is so good that it's necessary. I mean, I haven't gotten to play it, but I know that the Jamie Stegmaier game Viticulture, a lot of people see the expansion Tuscany as really essential, and to the point that they've now released an essential edition of the game, which was co-designed by Uwe Rosenberg. Can you imagine getting that call? Like, hey, I want to help design your game a little bit. Oh, yes, sir.
Don't mind. If you do.
You could be first on the list. Designed by you. The new version that they released has a couple of the modules from the Tuscany game, and I think some other rule twists, to the point that I don't think you can buy vanilla Viticulture anymore. I think in the reprints they're not even making it.
Exactly, like we were talking. Another, to harken back to our election episode, The Resistance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think of it as coming with an expansion. I always play with the expansion.
Right.
That comes in the box.
A thing that's interesting about the Resistance is that I think they've recognized that you need something. You need more than just the game. You need the cards. You know, they've released several different expansion packs. Apparently, and I read this somewhere, you want to be careful which edition of the published game you bought, because different expansion packs come rolled into the game depending when you bought it. So you may or may not have some of the expansions. If you're going to buy any of the Resistance expansions, double check that you don't already have them rolled into your game.
Yes.
But yeah, it's
perfect examples of patching the game expansions, I'd say. A next category that we could discuss is the money grab.
You know, that's an interesting one, right? Because we like to think of board game designers as people who love the hobby, who are pursuing it for artistic and creative endeavor. We presume most of them are making some money on it, but not making a living that way. So the idea of like the money grab is really an interesting aspect, which sometimes when there's a game that's very popular, people will accuse the designers of doing a money grab when in fact maybe they just love their game. So I have to say this is the hardest one for me to jump on board with.
Well, it certainly implies some understanding of the intentions of the creator or the publisher that we don't actually have.
Right.
I guess what we're talking about is an expansion that doesn't bring a lot beyond revenue.
Okay. One that I heard people complain a lot about, and I guess the reviews have been sort of mixed about this, is the Cthulhu Pandemic that just came out. Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu. Now, I will say, from the reviews that I've heard, it sounds like it actually has a number of rule tweaks that make the gameplay experience feel pretty different. But I know that the first thing almost every news report I read when this was coming out was, it's a Cthulhu cash grab.
Did you see Dan Rather He came back, special one-night episode. Talk
This
about
was the pandemic Cthulhu, Reign of Cthulhu, cash grab. Damn it, Matt Leacock.
I don't know if it's absolutely fair, but expansions to Cosmic Encounter that don't include the ability to play an additional player.
Uh-huh.
I guess I like having more races, and they generally come with more races.
So, just a ballpark, how many races for Cosmic do you think you have?
4 inches? I don't know. Hundreds?
Okay. And in a game, you use at most 6 to 8 of those?
We'll often play 2 or 3 games, so we could use 18.
Right. So 18, if you played 30 games of Cosmic and you set up your deck so that you never reused an ID, you might get through them all.
Maybe.
That's what we have. My family has all of the expansions for Heroes Wanted, the superhero game, and I keep the decks in such a way that we never reuse any of the superhero abilities, and we're not even a quarter of the way through the hero deck.
All right. Since there's a slight amount of shade throwing inherent in that, I think maybe we push on. The next category that I thought of was the standalone. I think these are great.
What is a standalone expansion?
So it's an expansion to an existing game, but it operates as its own completely playable independent game, or you can bring it together with the previous product and have a richer, fuller experience.
So I think that seems like a really good counter to the argument of the cash grab, right?
Yeah.
That if your expansion stands on its own, then you can let new players in with the newest, coolest thing without making them buy the old game. It's kind of hard to say cash grab when you've set it up so they don't have to have it all.
At the risk of being accused of sycophancy, I'd bring up Timber Peak, Last Night on Earth expansion.
Sycophancy being Latin for loving flying frogs.
If loving flying frog is wrong, I don't want to be right. That's a great expansion, and the way I've set up my collection of Last Night on Earth game equipment is I keep the original game by itself in its box, and then I have all of my expansions in the Timber Peak box. So Timber Peak is what I usually play. I can mix in components from the original game, but I don't have to. And then I can run 2 separate games. And I find that the smaller original game is easier to play with people who aren't as experienced with the game.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed the recent standalone expansion to Dead of Winter, which is ironically also a zombie game called The Long Night, which, again, it's a standalone game. You can mix it together with the other one, and if you're going to mix them, they sort of recommend that you replace the older components with the newer ones. That the newer components are slightly nicer in certain ways, but it's a completely standalone game, so you can play it entirely independent of the original game.
Mm-hmm.
It's really nice in a lot of ways. In particular, I think it's a welcoming way to get new players into the game without sort of building up the hurdles you need to start playing.
Sure.
The next item on our list is the included with the game expansion, which sort of like the Resistance where we talk about a patch. Yeah. I guess my thought here would be, particularly in the land of Kickstarter, where consumers are being more acquainted with the production cost of a game, and the production cost is becoming more modular. So to use an example from earlier, the Heroes Wanted game that I have, both times that they've done the Kickstarter, they had the game, and then they had 2 or 3 packs of additional heroes or villains that you pay extra for.
Okay.
And the game is set up in a way that you can just put it all in one box if you need to. Mm-hmm. In fact, I don't know why you wouldn't. But they sell them separately. In part, it's to maintain costs. 40 extra cards raises the cost of the base game. And there's plenty of people who just want to play the base game. Like I said, you'll have to play many times before you've used all the heroes in the base game.
Let alone once you get into the combinations in Cosmic or in that, it's astronomically improbable that you'd ever play a game with the same configuration.
Oh, for sure. But I think there's a legitimate question to be asked. Can you really call it an expansion when it's really just extra things that were available that you chose not to put in? That you sort of like, it's almost more like they sell a deluxe edition with more stuff in it. I guess for me, expansion suggests the game has had time to marinate and you're now adding content to it later. So I would be inclined to not call those expansions. The Kickstarter word is add-on. Yeah. That seems more apt to me.
Okay. The next one is the unending game.
An unending game. Oh, yeah. I like those.
Yes, you do. This would include things like collectible card games. living card games.
Trading card games, yes. The trading card game that everyone knows is Magic: The Gathering.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Which does go back to that original thing we talked about being accessible to newcomers, because with Magic, you can just buy the current set and you can play just fine. I mean, you might not be tournament caliber, but you certainly would be able to play with friends just using the set that's out now. And they have starter decks every time they release a new set. Magic is a game that is designed to let new players in all the time.
Now, the thing about Magic for me is, and I assume it's still the case, when you buy a set of cards, you don't know what you're getting.
I think the starter sets are more
predictable.
Yeah, or are standardized, but then the base part of the game, even if you buy starters, you get a few of the boosters that are randomized.
But if you're buying an expansion, you're getting a bag of you don't know what.
Yeah, I think that from what I've read, and I don't play Magic, I know enough about the game to know how it works.
Hey, Rolf.
Tell us how
he's not here.
Yeah, dang it. I used to play Vampire: The Eternal Struggle, which was a collectible card game. And the way we did that one generally is you could get most of the cards you needed by buying a whole box of boosters. So you'd buy 36 boosters. Usually what I did is I had a couple of friends who also played, and we would go in together and buy a box of boosters, which costs about $100. And it's interesting. You can still buy unopened boxes of Vampire boosters for about $100. Like they haven't, like the interest in the game has maintained their price enough that people are still buying them, I guess, but they haven't made it for a decade or more. Yeah, when we would buy it, we would all sit in a circle and open up all the boosters. And then I had a couple clans that I really liked of vampires. So people would give me all the cards from those clans and I would give them the cards from these others. And that was how we built our collections. I assume.
Who was that published by?
That was Wizards of the Coast. And actually, it's a Richard Garfield game.
Sounds like a great deal for Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah.
You go and buy $100 worth of product with no promise that it'll have anything that you want.
It's interesting sort of thinking about this. The idea of the LCG, the living card game, I've thought of it since I discovered the concept, which is maybe 2 years ago now. It's what I'd call the grown-ups growing card game, right? And in that, I mean, I think most grown-ups who are earning their own money and who have to decide on spending some money on games and other money on food don't find the thrill of opening a random booster pack worth the risk of getting 15 cards you don't want.
That is firmly how I stand.
Right.
That.
So for me, the living card game, which is the formal term that Fantasy Flight uses for their line of these games, but then there's also AEG calls it the extendable card game. There's other phrases that mean the same thing, where they offer regular expansions to the game, but they are standardized. The game I play obviously is Netrunner, and in Netrunner they offer an expansion about every 6 weeks. And that expansion is generally 60 cards, 3 copies each of 20 new cards. And it's the same regardless of where you buy it, right? If I buy that expansion, I have the cards. And the nice thing is by giving you 3 copies of each, they're giving you a play set. So one thing that makes Magic so difficult is that if you want to use the really good card that's rare to get a full play set, which is the most you can have in your deck is 4 copies, you need to buy an awful lot of cards, or you go online and buy it from someone who happened to find it in their booster pack for, I don't know, $10 or $20 or something. So there's no rarity in Netrunner, to the point that I was having a conversation online with somebody about the living card game model versus the trading card game model. And one comment that came up, I guess in the current Magic cycle, the cycle of Magic cards, in order to buy a complete play set of the cycle, it's about $900. Oh, jeez. Which, to be fair, Magic releases cycles of 250 cards, where that's a lot more than... In Netrunner, a cycle is about 120 cards. But the 120 new cards that come out in a 6-month cycle of Netrunner, or a 6-pack cycle, costs... That's 6 data packs of $15. Right? So just over $100, and you've got all the cards you need. 2 of those gets you to $200 for... 2 complete sets, which is about as much as you get in 1 set of Magic. Or you can go out now and find people who have played Netrunner since the beginning and decided they don't want to play it anymore and are selling the complete run of Netrunner cards for about $350. If you decide, I want to try Netrunner, I want to go all in, you can go buy a full set of Netrunner cards, every card in the card pool, for $350.
So my living card game of choice is a Game of Thrones.
Oh, nice.
Card game. I have a pretty robust collection, but they just did a thing to me. They just second editioned it.
Yeah.
So my stuff it's not going to be that living anymore.
Right. Well, on one hand, if that's the game you like, now that means you can have the complete set. That's the way I treat my vampire cards. Like, I don't buy new vampire cards now. I have a huge box full of vampire cards, and I have 8 or 10 decks built in that box. And if I ever want to show that game to somebody again, which it's been a while since I've played it, but what I'd do is go through that and make sure they're relatively even beginner decks.
Yeah.
And that's how I play the game. It feels like the potential to do that with your Game of Thrones cards. Now that they're done with the game, you could seek out every expansion before they go out of print, and then you have the complete game.
Yeah. You know, the other thing is I've enjoyed the Game of Thrones living card game. Do I trust them enough to assume that there's a reason they made a second edition besides, is it a cash grab?
Right.
Or is it, we refined this? Because there are a couple rough edges on that game.
Yeah.
Rules that, oh, geez, we forgot to.
Right.
So I'll definitely get the base set, and it'll be, you know, $20 or $30 and play that, and we'll see what I think.
It's been interesting because Netrunner, it seems like they're taking a couple approaches to that. One, I did a short podcast about how they're introducing a new kind of expansion.
Yeah.
Which is like a narrative expansion.
Almost a legacy product.
Right. Comes with these little cards that will get used up as you play. And the packs come in sealed groups so that as you play, you get to open them sort of like in a legacy game. But at the end, what you have is enough cards that it's equivalent to one of their deluxe expansions, which is roughly 60 cards.
Okay.
The model of the deluxe expansion. This is the place where I think people are starting to wonder if it's a cash grab, because the cost of this new narrative expansion is roughly double what they've charged for the deluxe expansions before that did not have this narrative component.
So how much is the expansion?
The retail for this new expansion, which is coming out in Q1 of 2017, is $60.
So what you're saying is after you've played through the narrative portion, you've paid $1 per card.
Right. $1 for new card. You get a play set of each card. Yeah.
Yeah. So if that's all you were interested in, it would cost $1 per card if you didn't want to enjoy the narrative portion.
And then at the end, you have tournament legal cards that you can use. The one thing about it is formally an expansion. It's not a standalone, so you do need the core set in order to play. I mean, the thing that makes the living card games really work well is that, unlike Magic, they maintain a core set that you can get. So like if you wanted to start playing Netrunner now, as long as you don't want to go full-on competitive, you could just buy the core set and then just start buying the expansion packs as they come out.
Yeah.
And they keep all the old expansion packs in print, although at the end of the next cycle, so sometime next year, the first 2 cycles of cards are officially going out of print.
Oh.
So it's funny, the guy at the store where I buy my cards is like, you might not want to buy those early cycle cards because they're going out. And I'm like, no. I'm buying them before they go away.
Yes,
He's like, but you won't be able to use them. And I'm like, I can use them at home. I don't need to be.
They don't you know, spontaneously combust upon removal from the system.
So, you know, I think the unending game of a living game, like the ones we've been talking about, those have expansions that make the game bigger and make it have more life. But there are other unending games that actually make the game have less life. And I would say for those, the 2 I would point to are Time Stories and Mansions of Madness. Have you played either of these games?
I played Mansions of Madness, but it was forever ago.
Okay. Both these games have very heavy narrative component that involves surprise. And Mansions of Madness is supposedly replayable.
Okay.
And I know people who failed the mission and then go and replay it again. And the new edition, the computer is now the dungeon master. It's not one versus many. It's completely co-op now.
Okay.
Time Stories is not replayable. Time Stories, you are a group of Quantum Leap style time travelers. You go back in time into the body of somebody in an old-timey area, and you're solving some sort of mystery. And as you play, these cards get revealed to you. And basically, it's a puzzle. You have to figure out how to most efficiently do the objective that the mission asks of you by sort of moving through the different time periods of the game within the allotted time that you have. So the first time you go, you may go into a room and there's a bunch of stuff to look at, and you spend some of your time looking at things that are ultimately not helpful to solving the mystery. So the next time you go, you know you don't need to look at anything in there, and then you save the time by not going in that room.
Sure.
And then there are some things you know you need to get this key to open that door, so you do always spend one time unit to go get that key. Most of the missions involve a level of puzzle solving. They're also heavily narrative, and there's a lot of excitement in revealing a new card or finding out something new that happens. And so as a result, they're not replayable. It's not like a legacy game where it's physically destroyed when you're done.
Unless you have Memento.
Right.
A case of Memento where you could keep playing it again for the first time.
Or frankly, just I have a terrible memory. So maybe 2 years from now, I won't remember the details. So
My wife's experience of popular culture is such that it makes me suspect that she could play that game on consecutive nights.
I'm cursed the other way. I'm a big Murder, She Wrote fan, but I haven't watched Murder, She Wrote in several years now because I've seen them all. So when an episode starts, we get 2 minutes and I'm like, oh, that guy did it. Every episode, in part because Murder, She Wrote is very formulaic. So
What?
Yeah. Who would have thought? There are some people who find this kind of game really upsetting because the economic model for most board games is you pay a certain amount for it and then you get to play it as many times as you want. And these games, Time Stories, Mansions of Madness, a lot of the escape room games that are coming out now, the legacy games fit this bill too. What you're paying for is the experience, and it may or may not be resellable when you're done. It definitely isn't replayable. So if you still think of it using the same dollars for replayability scheme that you might use for another game, these expansions are going to seem really unpleasant. But I think that the fact that you can use them up allows for a kind of narrative development that so far exceeds what you can do in a game that you have to be able to replay, that if you look at it as a night at the theater costs way more, you could buy Time Stories and all of the expansions for what you'd pay to go see a play downtown, depending which, the Broadway in Chicago, for instance. You go to one play, 2 people, you could buy Time Stories and all its expansions.
Well, how much is Time Stories?
Retail, I think it's $50, but if you pay more than $35, you're buying it at a game
You're
store.
generous. What we're saying is even at a cost of $35, how many people can play Time Stories?
Up to 4.
So if 4 people went to see a movie, you'd have a very difficult time getting out for fewer than $35. So at that level, you're right. Experiential, like the legacy games, you use it and it's used.
And then the Time Stories expansions are cheaper because you're not buying the bits that you need to play. You're just buying the new deck of cards.
Sure.
And if you just look at it as, I'm just buying a deck of cards, $25 is a lot to pay for a deck of cards. But what you're buying is all the development and the art that it takes to build that narrative. So.
Sure. I have Pandemic Legacy Blue. I think I'm going to get red because over the holidays, I'm going to be hanging out with some groups of mixed gamers, casual and serious hobby gamers. I think it would be fun to try that with.
Right.
Because Pandemic is, for me, a gateway game, co-op and everything.
Absolutely.
So see how they'd respond.
Just to be clear for our listeners, you're buying red just for the variety. It's not a different game.
I've already started Blue, so we're going to spend sort of a long weekend with some friends. It's possible that we could get through the whole thing.
Right.
It's also possible that we'd get through, a third of it, and then just next time we get together.
So you're buying red so you can tell apart the 2 copies that you got.
Exactly, which is my understanding of their purpose.
Yeah, there was at one point in one interview, Matt Leacock or Rob Davio made a joke that they're different. Like, there is one secret difference, and then the internet exploded with people like, oh my God, what a cash grab. They want people to buy both of them. And so you could find many places where I think Rob Davio mostly is saying they are not different. They are the same. The differences are there so you could tell them apart in case you want to buy more than one. They're not different. But Risk Legacy famously had underneath the insert an envelope that said, do not ever open this. And when you did, there was a card that changed the game, and there are 3 different cards. I don't think I'll ever play Risk Legacy, but I've avoided spoiling those, so I don't know what's on them, but I know there are 3 different ones.
The first categories that I thought of, which are going to be the last ones that we talk about, are the good and the bad. So the good, I actually put out on Twitter.
Oh.
I asked people to list some of their favorite expansions. We've gotten several responses, one of which, Robert Slimser. He's at Histka, Histtka. He actually mentioned A Clash of Kings for Game of Thrones First Edition.
Wow. He likes it so much that they made it part of the second game. They said, Robert, what do we need to do to make second edition better?
And boom, done. He gets things done.
Nice.
And then friend of the show, Scott Bogan of the Board Game Show, said that he really likes Leaders for Seven Wonders. He says it adds just enough extra that enhances rather than changes the solid base game. I can't disagree with Scott on that, so I won't.
Do you have the Leaders expansion? So
I've played it. I don't have it. I have Cities. I have...
So listeners, I don't have Seven Wonders. When I want to play it, I bug Rob and borrow his copy. I was not aware that he had any expansions. Are the other expansions you have mixed in, or do you just add them sometimes?
I do keep those completely separate.
Well, next time we play Seven Wonders, I want to try an expansion.
Ooh. There you go.
Okay.
And then The Dangerous Sea said that...
That sounds like an expansion itself. What if this is an expansion that has a Twitter handle?
The Dangerous Sea pointed out that Flashpoint has an expansion that lets you play as a Dalmatian.
Oh, nice.
And you know what? Don't we all, at the core of it, want to play as a Dalmatian?
You know, Dead of Winter, the original Dead of Winter lets you play as a dog, Sparky the stunt dog. Mm-hmm. And apparently the new one, I haven't seen it in my copy, but it's got an ape, like a little... And there are some people who absolutely hate that those characters are in there because it ruins the theme for them. Like the idea that a dog could carry and use a pistol makes them so angry that, you know, for a game that's really steeped in human betrayal and theme, to have something that silly. And I guess my feeling is I was just like, well, don't put Sparky in the game then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Consider him an expansion. Sure. The Sparky expansion. A game that I put on... I didn't respond on Twitter. Maybe I should have.
Yeah. I think that's called sock puppeting. If you, as Rattlebox Games, you tweet, "What's your favorite game?" and then Robbie Huber. Oh, I really like this game.
What I put out there is Scoundrels of Skullport, the expansion for the very lovely game Lords of Waterdeep.
And what does that add that makes you like it so much?
Adds more buildings. It adds some fun mechanics where you can take some sort of bold actions that you collect these blue skulls that are negative points at the end. So you have to sort of make sure you're balancing the advantage that you're getting now with the cost that it's going to make at the end of the game. It also adds new locations to place things.
Sure.
I believe that there are 2 sets of locations you can add. It can really change that game. It's a great game. Could be my favorite worker placement game.
Nice.
It's a welcome expansion. It didn't feel sort of tacked on. It didn't feel like it changed the game in a way that I didn't like, which would be easy to do because I like the game a lot.
Mm-hmm. I would say an expansion that I would see as an essential, and I know that when they just released a new edition of this game and did not include this expansion in it, it's still a separate expansion that they're bringing out or that you can buy, is the Power-Up expansion for King of Tokyo. King of Tokyo is this sort of, I would say, gateway level dice rolling game about big kaiju fighting over Tokyo. It is mostly dice rolling. There are some cards that you can buy in the game, but everybody has access to the same market of cards. Yeah. The Power-Up expansion gives each monster its own set of evolution cards that you earn in a different way. And for me, it makes the game have just a little bit more individuality for the characters. When you're picking a character, you really can feel like it does a particular thing because your powers are different. Just a little more flavor. It's not my favorite game. It's a little dry, but with the power-ups, I think it adds just enough that it goes from being a game I'd not really want to play all that often to a game I enjoy when it comes onto the table.
Yeah, I agree with you on all of that. You know, the fact that the game has so much theme and fun art, and then with the base game, there's no difference. You know, I'm a giant robot rabbit, and I'm fighting a giant, not Godzilla, but Godzilla.
Right.
And we're exactly the same. I've got friends who, until the Power-Up expansion came, they couldn't play it because they couldn't get past the conceptual hurdle that there's no difference in gameplay between those two things.
I think in the Power-Up expansion that comes with a variant or a suggested variant where you get to draw or draft some cards to start with, so you start with powers, and we generally play that way.
I agree, though. Nice expansion. Does that also add the panda?
Yes. The panda comes with the
It
power
also
up.
even comes with, what would you say, martial arts panda? I don't know exactly. Not samurai panda.
Right.
He's got like a bow staff.
Would you call it a kung fu panda?
Not if I didn't want to get sued.
That's right. Or that's why they didn't call it that. He's also gigantic. But do you have any expansions that you bought that you don't like?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, I do. And a game that I enjoy, I think I enjoy it more than you. I like the way that the table hums when I'm playing a game of Cosmic Encounter. Mm-hmm. I find that the rewards, there's a set of cards where you can get rewards for helping people defend their planets.
Okay.
When you play with that, experienced players start just really leaning into that because these are terribly powerful cards. Oh. What ends up happening is everyone's defending everything always. And it led to, I played a 7-player game of that and everyone was doing that because from like tactically it makes sense. It's going to improve my situation if I help you.
Right.
I'll get these cards. The problem is the game can't move forward. So
if nobody's ever getting,
I don't think we actually finished the game, or if we just called it quits. Since then, I have left those rubber banded and off by themselves because I don't like what they do to the game.
So I have an expansion that I have not left rubber banded because it does add more later, but by itself I wasn't too happy with it. I'm a fan of the game Elder Sign, which is a dice rolling Cthulhu themed game, and they've released 2 expansions for it that are sort of robust reimaginings of the game. You buy the original game and the idea is you're exploring a museum and fighting off Cthulhu-based horrors, Lovecraftian horrors in this museum. And the 2 expansions they've released, The Gates of Arkham and Omens of Ice or something like that, those 2 are both games where they provide you with a whole new deck of location cards and some new mythos cards. And so basically they're giving you like an entire new location to play the game in. You have all new locations, slightly different rules about how the locations work. Really adds a lot to the game, gives you a lot of variety. When you play, you can like, do you want to play in the museum or in the Arctic or in the city? But the first expansion they made was this one called Unseen Forces. And it gave you 2 dice and a bunch of new locations that include references to these dice and a couple new mythos cards. But what they do is one card is a bless. You can get blessed and cursed, basically. And when you're blessed, you
with
get
your
this,
fierce tears?
Right. When you're blessed, you get this white die that's basically the same as the green dice in the game. So you just get 1 extra die. And as long as you never fail a mission, you can keep using that die. If you get cursed, you get a black die that basically, as soon as it matches one of the other dice you've rolled, it removes that other die from the game. And you're cursed until you succeed at a mission. So it functions when you're just using those. It really does function to stall out the game in certain ways that it suffers from a runaway leader problem because when you're doing well, you're acquiring more equipment cards and you have more and more ways to mitigate bad rolls. If you're doing poorly, you don't have any equipment cards. And so you have to do well on one of the missions without any extra help, which is generally very hard unless you get one of the super easy ones, of which there aren't very many. And then if you get cursed on top of it, now you're losing a die every turn. And so it's already a game that has a runaway leader problem, and the blessed and cursed dice just exacerbate that issue. So we do play with them because the later expansions add enough other stuff that now the blessed and cursed things add flavor. But I didn't use them when that was the only expansion I had.
Sounds like we're both agreeing that expansions that slow the game down are bad.
Indeed.
Go figure.
Actually, the car racing game Formula D has a little-known expansion called Stuck Handbrake that makes your car just go slower.
Well, I don't think that anyone can accuse us of not having spoken enough about game expansions for now. And I wouldn't be surprised if we somehow end up revisiting this later anyway. But to keep this conversation going, you all know, all you have to do is come visit us over on Twitter at Rattlebox Games.
Or on Facebook at facebook.com/rattleboxgames.
Yeah, or you could shoot us an email, podcast@rattleboxgames. Those go directly. You send us an email, bing, my phone makes a sound. Goes right to us.
My phone goes, Chrome. No.
Yes, the secretary doesn't get that. I don't have any of my PAs or interns. No, none of them.
Wow.
It's right to me.
Nice.
At that point, Brendan, I think it's probably time for us to make some recommendations.
Which means it's time to get out the big old recommendation die.
1d4?
1d4.
Let's roll a 20-sider. Let's roll the D100.
We're now adding 50% to this podcast. All recommendations. And I rolled a 4 again. That was the same as last week. I don't know if you picked a weighted 4-sided die here or the universe wants us to
really recommend stuff. All right. Well,
why don't you start us off? Yeah.
Okay. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things I've been doing a lot of is editing audio. I'm going to edit this. I edit the Matter of Drag podcast. I make music for these podcasts. I'm doing a lot of stuff. And then actually out in my everyday life, I'm listening to podcasts and music almost constantly. And to do this, I generally use headphones.
Ooh.
It's a little technology that I've caught on to, and I really think it's going to go somewhere.
Nice. I may have to replace that metal tube that I have. The pointy one that looks like a
cone.
cornucopia. Yeah.
Yes. Your wax cylinders.
That's right. Getting this podcast on wax cylinders is really a burden.
But if you guys keep contributing, we'll keep sending those out to you.
Right.
Those are our sustaining fans. So what I wanted to recommend is some headphones.
Ooh, great.
For these applications, I'm not a big fan of the earbuds.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, just having those in your ear that long sometimes feels a little gross.
Okay.
So I'm going to recommend a couple of specific headphone sets. One of which, the first one, is the KOSS, K-O-S-S, Porta Pro. Right now, they're about $35 on Amazon, and you can get, I think for $39, you can get the same headphones, but with an inline microphone and 3 buttons to go volume up, volume down, pause, play.
Oh,
Also
nice.
answer calls or whatever. The depth of sound that you get and the isolation of room noise that you get from these headphones is quite nice. If you're willing to spend a little more money, the Audio-Technica ATHM 50S is a nice pair of headphones. It's $135.
Oh, those are robust headphones then.
They are. They are more over your ear. Yes, but they are a bit of an investment. Whereas I really feel like those Porta Pros.
Yeah, $35. That's
they fold up to get a little smaller.
Less than a new copy of Time Stories.
There you go. And I really think when it comes right down to it, oh geez, I've eaten up most of the time. When it comes down to it, you could easily get 5 pairs of bad headphones for $7 before you'd run out of these.
Oh, that makes sense. I have 2 things to recommend. The first is a novel called The Girl with All the Gifts. It's a zombie novel in which one of the main zombies is a girl who's really smart, even though she's a zombie. And it takes place in a world where fungus is the main vector by which the zombie virus spread. It's quite good. I know there's a film coming out, either already came out or coming out soon. So definitely worth checking out. And then over the weekend, my family saw Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, which I found quite enjoyable. I would say it's on par with maybe Harry Potter 6 or 5. Decent if you like the
go ahead, finish.
If you like the Harry Potter franchise, I think it'll be right up your alley.
Yes, you have to like the franchise. In our show notes, I wrote Rob mildly dissents. It was okay. It wasn't fabulous. It was nice to return to the world.
Yeah,
but
that's what I felt about 5 and 6 in the films.
The wheels were spinning. So what should we talk about next episode?
Well, I think next episode will land just before the holidays, so I think we should talk about how to survive the holidays in a gamerly way. What do you do with your family? What do you do to play with people who don't normally play? How do you find time to play games that scratch that itch even though you're hanging out with noobs?
Yep. All right. Well, that's what we'll do. And if you want to talk to us about that or anything else, as we mentioned, Twitter, email, Facebook, what have you. In the meantime, thanks for listening. Go check out all of our podcasts, and we'll look forward to talking to you in 2 weeks about how to survive the holidays the gamer way.
Bye-bye.
Ta-ta.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.
Hi, this is Rob, the Dungeon Master for Rattlebox Games podcast, The Matter of Drag. I'm here with our 3 players. One word. Why should people listen? Bernard.
Yeah!
Larn.
Piglets! Can I try again?
All right, Raven, bring them home. What's your one-word reason for why everyone should tune in every other week to the Matter of Drag podcast?
I mean, like, fire. Yes, fire. Do I not get another chance?
In Dungeons & Dragons promos, as in life, there are no second chances, but you get a chance every other week to listen to us. See you there.